Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Elise. If you're new here, I'm so glad to have you. Today I'm going to be showing you a quick way to use regular die cuts to make a plush. Here is the finished product. It is this cute little pillow for the Tooth Fairy. And let's get into the products. So this is using one of the new released products from Waffle Flower. And it's this cute tooth shaped die, and it's got a whole bunch of little accessories. Now I've got some felt. This is the regular old cheap kids felt. I bought it at Michael's, nothing fancy to it. I'm using that big tooth die to die cut out the shape of this plush. I'm going to cut that out of the blue felt, and I'm going to cut 2 of those. I'm also going to be using some of the other accessories like the teeth and the stars to decorate my little plush. I am going to run this through my Gemini Junior die cutting machine. I am going to be sure to use the metal shim to get enough pressure to cut through the felt. So whatever die cut machine you use, be sure that you use the extra shims. Now I'm going to cut out this little kind of pill bottle shape. This will serve as the pocket for my die. I could just go ahead and snip this, just myself, just cut it freely without using the die cut, but I'm never going to get a perfect cut like I would with the die. I'm not going to die cut this completely because the top has cuts and I would not be able to use it as a pocket if I just went ahead and die cut this out completely. So just going to go ahead and stick that in. Still got my shim in, and here we can get moving on to the assembly. So you can see those little stars and the tooth that I've cut out. And I've got that pocket. I need to go ahead and decorate the little pocket front first so I don't accidentally sew down the tooth onto the larger tooth so that that pocket remains intact. Basically, I want to do all of my decorating and then do my assembly. So I am going to go ahead and start sewing down that first tooth. I've got some embroidery floss. This is just regular old DMC 6-strand embroidery floss. Again, you can buy this at Michael's or Joann's or Hobby Lobby. I'm going to be using the white and the yellow. This is 6-strand, but I do end up separating it out so that I'm only using 2 of the strands and not all 6. Just going to unwind that and get a good amount so that I can start doing my stitching. Now, as far as needles go, most of the time when I stitch on cards, actually all the time when I stitch on cards, I use these tapestry needles. They are completely dull, but those already have holes punched out. This does not, because it's not meant for plush. So I need to use a sharp needle, just a regular old needle you would use to sew a button onto pants or something like that. Like I said, nothing fancy there. I want to show you just quickly how I stitch on the tooth. I'm just using a back stitch technique. So I'm going up through the back, and I've got a knot on the back of that string and just going and stitching down. And then I will come back out the front and stitch back down to kind of join those 2 stitches together. I am no hand stitching or embroidery expert. This is just fun for me, and I thought this would be fun to show you guys a different way to stretch your craft supplies. This looks completely and totally handmade. If you wanted it to look a little bit more professional, you could use a sewing machine, or I'm sure that a lot of you are much better at stitching than I am, so yours might come out more professional. However, I kind of like that this has that handmade look. I always say the projects that we make aren't supposed to look perfect, because then they wouldn't be handmade. They're unique, and everything should have our own unique spin on it. So not perfect at all. But I still love the character of this. So just going ahead and stitching down that tooth, I'm only going to show you one. By the way, for those of you who watch a lot of my videos and probably already know, I don't have any kids. So I will probably end up gifting this to a friend that has a child that in the next couple of years might start to lose some teeth. And so she might want this. But I think this would be such a fun project for, parents or grandparents, to give to a, child that is of tooth losing age. And they could put this underneath their pillow with the tooth in it and wait for the tooth fairy to come. As a small child, I loved it when the tooth fairy would come and visit. Although apparently the tooth fairy these days is far more generous to children than they were in my day. I think we would be lucky to get a dollar bill. I think a tooth fairy usually left something like a quarter for a regular tooth. And now apparently the tooth fairy is very generous. Let me know what the tooth fairy leaves for your kids in the comments down below. I'm just curious and doing some market research for later on in life. Okay, so I've got that tooth sewn on. Now I'm going to move on to doing these stars. So I'm kind of doing these in a different way. At first I thought I was going to use these sequins, but I'm basically just doing a French knot. So I'm coming up through the middle of the star, and then if you want to use a sequin, you can. I end up just picking these off because I'm only using 2 strands of floss. It's not enough of enough of a knot to keep these sequins on. So what you want to do is just wrap around the needle, pull it tight, and stick the needle back through the sequin or back through the hole and pull it through while keeping that string as tight as you can so you don't get any gaps. And then you have this little knot. So like I said, I ended up not doing the sequins and just doing the knots, and some of my knots aren't perfect, but that's okay too. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that back stitching again, but because this is white on gray, it is a little bit easier to see, so I wanted to leave some of this in. So I just went down. Now I'll pop back up out the front and stitch back down in that same hole that I used for the first stitch. Some people call this a running stitch or a back stitch. You can YouTube those if you want to see a more in-depth video on that. But it's pretty simple to do, even for someone like me that has no training in cross stitching or hand embroidery. So here's the stitches. Pretty simple, but this is really coming together. We're going to move on to stitching together the 2 pieces of felt for the teeth. So I have a knot at the end of my string and I'm just pulling it through the first layer. I will then run it back through both layers. I'm just trying to hide that knot. And once my string is most of the way through, there'll be a little loop and I'm going to push my needle through that loop. All I am doing here to close these 2 together is a blanket stitch. Pretty simple, does not take too long to do, but is really good at sealing things together. And I'm sorry, quite a few times I am out of frame, mostly because I'm trying to bring it up to my face to see it for stitching. So here's that hole, that extra loop of fabric, I should say. And I am just going to push my needle through it and then tighten. And it adds that kind of little edged look on your project. So once you do this stitch, you are just going to do this the entire way around to seal your plush. Now, I am going to add some just basic batting into it so that this is more like a little pillow. So I'll stop midway and show you that as well. By the way, you always want to come in from the same direction. So I started in coming in from the back up to the front. And so that's the way I'm going to continue the entire way around so that it looks even. So you see that little hole there? I am just going to push my thread through it and make that little seal on the edge. So now I've got quite a bit done, but I have this little pocket and I'm going to add in my batting. Like I said, this is literally like nothing fancy fill. And I'm not adding a ton. This is relatively very small. And I don't trust my stitching enough to think that I did a good enough job to keep this closed if it had a lot of fluff in it. Will this last forever? No, but it is very cute, and I think it would probably last for one child to use. Although not having children, I don't know. I can't remember how long it took me to lose all of my teeth. Anyways, I'm just putting in that batting, getting it to a thickness that I like. And from there, I can keep stitching. So just adding that in, kind of moving it around, making sure it's flat and where I want it. And then I can go back to my stitching. So I'm just, once again, going in from the back, trying to space these out as evenly as I can, creating that loop and pushing through to the front. Just that basic blanket stitch over and over and over again. By the way, apologies about my nails. This was definitely need to repaint my nails day. So they're not wonderful. Apologies for that. I promise in the next video they will be nicer. So just going to go ahead and seal that up, but I am going to add just a little tiny bit more batting in that little corner of the edge of the tooth before I close it up. So then I'm going to close it up, and that completes this project for today. I think it's really fun to take a look at some of your dies and think of creative ways that you could use them that aren't just for cards. Dies are expensive, and so it's nice to be able to find other ways to use them to make them worthwhile for your projects. You could use a basic circle die and make a sun plush. There's so many different things that you can do. So I challenge you to think about the ways that you can use your dies differently. And I hope that you enjoyed watching this video. I had a lot of fun making this project, something a little bit different to show all of you. I hope that you are all doing well. Please subscribe to see more from me, and I hope that you watch another video from me to get a little bit more inspiration, and I will catch you in the next one.